Alrighty, everybody. Next stage, you've waxed the inside of your gourd, ideally, and it turned out well. I want to talk about the netting on the outside, such as this. There's a couple different styles you can do the netting. I actually prefer this style. I just like the look of it better. There's less knots throughout it. So you can see it kind of from a top view. Basically, I have one ring going around, one ring right here going around. I have another ring going around. I'm going to show you that. That's step one, to make the two rings. Step two is to take your kind of weaving string and to move in and out. Now, I have one on the top and one on the bottom here. You can see I went around it twice. That's why it looks like this. Also up here I did one twist. Sometimes you can do a couple twists to make it look pretty cool and lock the string in there a little bit more. But like I said, this is my gourd from, I believe, 1994 is what I've been using it for since, and it's still holding true. So what I do is I've already pre-cut a piece of string just from your jute roll that you have. You kind of want to generally measure roughly the length of string you want around the top and around the bottom. This is, I should also say, this is a project that works really good to be able to sit down and put this gourd in your lap, use your knees to hold the gourd upside down to help you. I'm going to try to do it on the table. It's just it stands out a little bit more and it might be easier for filming. So one thing I pre-did is I did my top ring right here. So I have my top ring. I'm going to work on my bottom ring right now. One thing you should pay attention to with your rings, don't make them too big. Natural fiber tends to stretch, and it's very easy and pretty common for people to make the bottom ring especially too big, and it eventually slips off and comes off your gourd. So if anything, I would go smaller. I would try to go roughly around this area right here on my gourd. And what I typically do, use any kind of fancy knot that you know. You can use, I'm not sure if I'm calling it correct, a double fisherman's on either side. You can even just simply do a square knot to tie them together. You just need to tie these together, the ends together, to be able to do it. But I personally like the fisherman's. I call it fisherman's. Just do a single over. Typically come through with the tail where the X is. So I do one side right now, because my other side I can still adjust the tail for the circle. And I will take it and I'll gauge the size. That's a little bit too big still. So I'm going to pull the tail in a little bit more to make the circle a little bit smaller. That's looking pretty good. I like that. Now with this particular knot that I'm using, I need to pull the strings away from each other, making the circle a little bit bigger. So I'm going to come in maybe about another inch or so. I'm going to tie the other side of this as close as possible to my other knot. And I pull those together. So I have an extra tail here. I'm just going to take my knife, cut the extra fiber off. So there's my bottom circle. You could take pine pitch if you wanted to. The next thing, actually, let me back up before I talk about the pine pitch. The next thing, and the hardest thing, is to keep these, the top circle and the bottom circle, where you want them to be. So that's when you come to the modern era and you just use some Scotch tape, some blue painter's tape. What we've done in the past, kind of a little more primitively, when we've made these this fiber out of a whole bunch of dog bane, I'll take my top loop and my bottom loop, and I'll simply cut some string. And if you can visualize this, I'll tie the string here, my loop, my top circle, a vertical string down to my bottom circle. I'll take 4 to 6 of these, and I'll do the 4 directions, and then sometimes I'll add in between. And that's one way to be able to keep your circles in place without using some kind of tape. If you tie the strings, a keeper string, let's call it a keeper string. If you tie the keeper strings between your top circle, your bottom circle, try to get them even all the way around. That will also help keep it in place before you start weaving. But for me, right now, because I am hanging out in my garage, I had access to some tape. I will kind of look down the gourd. This is kind of wide tape, so I'm going to split it in half. Trying to make the circle, top circle, look fairly even. This is kind of can be a frustrating, tedious process. It takes me several tries, I should say, to kind of get this right, especially when I start weaving. So there's my tops. If you can see that. And I'm going to work on my bottom circle, the exact same. I turn it upside down. Nice thing about the bottom is the center, I'm not sure what you call that, nub there. I put that right in the center of my string, and I use that as my gauge for where I'm taping my string to. One more side. Alrighty, there's my bottom string. Here's my top string, my circle, my anchor points. Get rid of some of that. Now it's kind of a guessing game. What I tend to do, I have my jute next to me. If you want some contrast, you could use some green. I tend to go with the all tan. And what I'm going to end up doing is, if you can visualize, I'm going to go from my top loop, as you can see here, top loop, top ring here, and I go down to my bottom ring, and I go from my bottom ring back to the top, down to the bottom, back to the top, to the bottom. So I want to visualize this, and this is where I need to try to kind of measure my string length. So there's 2 times, and if I were to count, if I want to go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Let's call it 14 times, only going around once. So I'm going to take roughly this measurement here, plus a little extra. It's always better to have too much. I'm going to add this times 14. There's 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Let's go 16. Let's go a little bit more. Cut that. All right, so here's the tricky part. What I tend to like to do, I like to come under . There's my tail right here. I'm going to tape my tail here. You can kind of see my tail here on my original gourd. That's where the 2 ends tied. I have another one somewhere right here. There's another where two ends tied because, like I said, I went around that cord twice. So I'm going to anchor and keep my tail here. Now, some of you are probably saying, well, couldn't you do much like the belt and start halfway through the string? You probably could. I haven't actually tried it, but you probably could. I would encourage you to try it. But I kind of like to suffer through things, so I will start it at the tail end, and then I'll let you find shortcuts. So I have my tail. What I tend to do is take all of my string. This is where you can kind of get a little bit creative. And I'm going to wrap around and underneath like this. So it requires kind of taking the tail, pulling this through behind the string you just threaded. Nope, that turned out wrong. Stand by. So what I want to do is this, and then pull it through. There we go, that's right now. So I'm going to anchor and hold this while I pull the rest of the string through. Okay, there's my tail. You can see it's kind of got 1-2 twists in it. It's a nice look. I'll kind of cinch it up a little bit, tighten it up a little bit, but don't tighten too much, because then if you tighten this too much, you're pulling this ring down, and then it's going to be lopsided on the other side. I kind of like that angle. If I didn't like that angle, right here, I'm talking this angle here, I could bring it this way, or if I wanted it more straight up and down, I'd remove that tape. But now I'm kind of doing it loose the first time around. I come down to my lower ring. I tend to go under. There we go. And then once again, I'm going to come under this to create kind of like a bite. A little bit on the loose side, so I'm going to tighten that up just a little bit. All right, so there's my bottom ring. I realized my braids were swinging in front of the camera as I was doing this, so I tucked them in my shirt, so they're missing from the photo now. So now I'm going to come back up to the top ring. I come underneath, pull the string through. Okay. Come underneath, pull the string around. So I seem to kind of be confusing myself a little bit, because this has another wrap to it. They're not even and consistent. So maybe I went the wrong way. But as I look at that, I might want to do another one. So that's one twist around. I might want to come and do a second twist around. Let's leave that for right now. I can always fix this later because the tail. And I come down to the bottom, do the same thing. Pull that through. Well, let me show you this. So I wrap around, pull it this way. I'll do it one more time. I'm going to have to come to the top again. And I went around this one twice, so I'm going to do the exact same to keep consistency. One. Kind of place it so I have what looks to kind of be an equal triangle. There's two.